Hey guys, Josh from the Ancient History Guy here. Hello and welcome to all. I hope you are having a fantastic day. Today we are going to be talking about ancient Rome, specifically ancient Rome after the Punic Wars, and how the rich ended up getting richer whilst the poor got poorer. So, for those that don't know, the ancient Romans, situated in Italy, fought 3 wars with their neighbouring western power Carthage, who the Romans called Punics, hence why we call these wars the Punic Wars. Carthage was a Phoenician trading colony that eventually grew so profitable that it became its own distinct nation, gradually building up a fantastic trade empire in the western Mediterranean. Now, the first war between Carthage and Rome started over a bit of a diplomatic mess over in Sicily, which if you notice on the map is smack bang right in the middle between Carthage and Rome. To cut things short, a city in Sicily asked the Carthaginians for military aid, and when the Carthaginians showed up with a bit too much muscle, the city asked Rome to kick the Carthaginians out. Rome won the war after defeating the huge Carthaginian navy, making their defeated foes give up all territorial claim over Sicily, whilst also having to pay a large war reparation. Now, Carthage bounced back, largely thanks to the efforts of the military family called the Barcids. The Barcids conquered much of modern-day Spain, with the richest of these lands flowing back into Carthage. After a border skirmish between the Carthaginian allies and the Roman allies, the two powers dove headfirst into war again. Led by the great general Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginians ravaged the Italian homeland. Despite eventually being defeated, Hannibal had left a lasting impression on the Roman psyche. Never before had Rome come so close to falling. Carthage, again, having lost the Second War with Rome, had to pay a huge war reparation. However, the city managed to pay off the reparations early, thus allowing the city to potentially be a threat to Rome again. As a result, Rome was terrified of Carthage attacking the Italian peninsula again, and so after many speeches in the Roman Senate, the Third War began. Now, the Roman army was a volunteer army. You had to be a citizen and a landowner in order to qualify to join this army. The idea behind this was that these citizens would be more loyal due to the fact they had no actual ties to the general commanding them. Generals that could potentially turn their army on Rome. For the average Roman soldier of the time, the main concern was simply getting back home to your tiny farm, which funnily enough is all the way home in Italy. There was also the psychological factor in the fact that these men were literally fighting for their families, and if they were defeated in battle, then what was to stop the enemy from attacking your homeland and then destroying everything you loved? So a big war with Carthage erupts, and pretty much every able-bodied man that is qualified joins the Roman army, leaving behind hundreds of thousands of these tiny smallholdings, all of which have now lost their main breadwinner. This wouldn't have been so much of a problem if the war was happening on Italian soil, or if it was a short war. The problem, however, was that Carthage is quite a far distance away from Italy. It's also a highly industrialised and very rich society that is more than up to the task of defending itself against Rome. So this third war with Carthage drags out longer. This meant that the financial burden of having to keep up these small holdings back home was just not feasible, and when the soldier returned, his small holding was pretty much in ruins. Basically, the farmer went to war, served his country, and then came back broke. This is in stark contrast to the coffers of Rome. Rome actually benefited massively by conquering Carthage. Rome's treasury was practically overflowing with loot, and now with access to Carthaginian trade routes, financially, the Republic had never been that good. As a result, we have this weird situation where Rome was richer than it had ever been before. However, the soldiers who had literally fought the war and made it possible for Rome to be this rich ended up being even poorer than they were when they had left. So, how did this happen? This is where the richer, more elite citizens began to take advantage of the situation. Knowing that these poor farmers had nothing, these men would swoop in and buy up these small holdings at a fraction of what they were really worth. This gave the former owners some immediate cash, however it was hardly enough to start over again. Worse still, these richer, more elite owners would not hire these families, rather they would employ slaves in the hundreds to work the fields. Why pay someone when you can get all the labour for free? As a result, these now homeless farmers and their families began to head towards the cities, where the influx of poor homeless families quickly resulted in slums and horrendous conditions. Meanwhile, the rich, who had bought all of these small holdings, now had huge plantations and were making some serious money. all the free slave labour, together with the huge amount of land available to them, meant they were able to turn over a huge profit. Whilst this was happening, more and more veteran legionaries and their families were having to live in horrendous conditions in the big cities, all desperate for work that was simply not there. As more and more veterans returned to their families and farms that had been brought out by rich landowners, the situation only got worse. This eventually resulted in sympathetic noble families, noticeably the Gracchi brothers, pooling together their resources and influence in order to help the poor. This was the start of a social-political split in the Roman Republic, with those trying to help the poor becoming known as the populares, whilst those wanting to keep things the way they were, with the rich getting even richer, becoming known as the optimates. Gradually, the Gracchi brothers and their allies managed to slowly improve the situation for the poor, mainly by redistributing land back to these veterans. However, this splitting of Roman society in two began to breed its own sort of fanaticism, with gangs supporting each party clashing in the streets of Rome. Both Gracchi brothers fell victim to this level of violence, as both were killed by gangs led by the leaders of the Optimate party. This level of political violence would become the norm for the next century, notably resulting in Rome erupting into their first proper civil war between the generals Marius, a populares, and Sulla, an optimate. This war, known as the Social War, devastated Rome, with thousands being executed by either side for simply supporting another party. After both Sulla and Marius died, the two sides would clash again, when the populares leader Julius Caesar clashed with the optimates, who were now wary of how much popular support Caesar was gathering. Caesar eventually defeated the optimates after a very long civil war, and began to carry out reforms to help fix the problems that had been caused by all this turmoil over the past century, eventually making himself dictator in order to more effectively carry out the reforms that needed to be done, paving the way for his successors to form the Roman Empire. To summarise, the end of the Punic Wars and the fall of Carthage brought immense wealth into Rome. However, only those that were in the position to benefit from it actually did. Their greed for more and an easy cash grab in the form of simply buying out these broke veteran landowners resulted in the splitting of Roman society in two and ultimately in the fall of the Roman Republic. So what are my thoughts on this? Well, personally I find it interesting how the situation developed. On one side you have this brilliant business move by the rich elite, who saw basically a cash cow situation that required very little upfront cost, and ultimately in the short term they benefited greatly from it. On the other hand, you have to consider just how much of a detrimental impact the rich elite buying up all of the land had on the poor veterans. It basically made a majority of the population returning from war homeless, and these were men that were not going to simply lounge about in their despair. They rallied behind a political movement whose whole purpose was to improve their lot in life and essentially got back what had been theirs in the first place. And when you look at the long-term effects of what happened to Rome after these two parties formed and started clashing, you start to realise just how much this single action of taking advantage of the poor resulted in the complete collapse of the Roman Republic and the birth of the Roman Empire. But what do you think? Let me know down in the comments below.
Thank you for watching and listening to our videos. Be sure to like, comment and subscribe if you've enjoyed. All sources are listed and linked in the description below. I've been the Ancient History Guy, and as always, I'll be seeing you later.